Hey everybody, it's Kelly. Welcome back to another episode of Ask a Therapist. Have you heard these things said?
Sex is just for procreation.
There's only ever been two genders.
Being trans is such a new thing.
Being mad about heteronormativity is selfish.
Well, if you read the comments on this channel, you've definitely read these things. But I'd be willing to bet that if you're a subscriber or a frequent watcher on this channel, you've also heard these things in your everyday life. So we're talking about them today in this video because I'd love to give you some context, either to respond or at least to conceptualize why these are so wrong. Because sometimes, in my experience anyway, you know these things are wrong that are being said, but even if you wanted to engage, it's sometimes hard to articulate to people why these things are so completely incorrect. Basically, the point of today's video is that as a society, we have moved beyond the limited understanding that the Puritans and the church and the colonizers put on the early United States settlements, that marriage was a necessity and that it was a man and a woman and that you were exactly who you were born to be at the moment that you were born and that's all you were ever going to be and da 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 da. That's not the case anymore. And existing like it's the case is only holding you as a person back and society back as a whole. To give some societal context for this, I want to talk about a dude named Maslow. Now, Maslow himself, a fairly problematic person. We are not going to get into the benefits and negatives of him as a person. We're going to take one very well-known aspect of his philosophy and apply it to society as a whole. Here we go. Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Here you go, right here. Take a gander. We're going to start at the bottom and go up to the top, okay? I'm going to explain this for you. The very bottom base need in this theory are your physiological needs, okay? What's a physiological need? That's food, that's water, that's rest. The things that your body needs, those are your physiological needs, okay? From a personal standpoint, as a person, you need those needs met before you can even attempt to achieve any of the other needs above it. On a societal level, you wouldn't be able to establish a community or build a society, found a country in a place where there was no food or was no place for people to rest. Society, personal, we understand that, right? Tier 2 is safety. And that is not like in a theoretical sense, that is in a literal sense. So the current dangers you are safe from, and the immediate future dangers you are also having a way to be safe from. From a societal aspect, maybe you're working on a settlement and you have structures or a fence, or you have people who are standing watch so that things that might eat you don't get into your encampment, right? Once you have tier 1 and tier 2 taken care of, then and only then can you start on tier 3, which is social. That's love and belonging. That's where on a societal level, you want to belong to this community and you do not worry about being kicked out. You're part of that society. You don't worry about being kicked out. Now, churches, a lot of religions, but specifically churches, I'm gonna go specifically to the Catholic Church actually, because we're very aware of how the Catholic Church does this. The other denominations kind of do this a little more subtly. Many churches literally don't go beyond this tier, and they say they do, but actually, if you live your life in your religion in fear of being excommunicated, in fear of being kicked out if you don't obey the rules, you do not go beyond this tier. Because to go beyond it means you do not worry about losing your fellowship, your belonging in this society, in this group, okay? Period. Because number 4 is self-esteem, and that is where you already have the love and belonging, you already have the promise of belonging, and then you want to stand out. Maybe you want to take on a leadership role. Maybe you want to show your specific skill set. If you're in a society, you want to dig into what's unique about you and then perform for the society in that way. You have more people in specialized vocations because they're vocations that they're good at instead of just vocations they need filled because the society needs to run, right? That's where in most civilizations, that's where you have people like start to figure out what would make them be admired and respected in that society that they're in. And then the last one, the very top of this pyramid, tier number 5, is self-actualization, and that's becoming the most complete and authentic version of yourself. is self-actualization. That's becoming the most complete and authentic version of yourself. And in that tier, everyone is free to become aligned with their values and their higher purpose. I would submit to you that as a society, we have been operating on a couple of different tiers, but over the course of the last, I don't know, at least 40 years, we have begun to attempt to break into that top tier, that self-actualization, where people have begun to be more able to live out loud, where so many had been forced to live quietly before that. So that is not to say that people were not part of the LGBTQIA plus community prior to that. It is not to say that people were not trans prior to that. And I will get to that later in the video. But that is to say that the living out loud into that, because our society had gotten to a point where physiological needs were met, safety needs were met, social needs were met, self-esteem needs were met, and then self-actualization can start to happen. But when self-actualization starts to happen, people need to be allowed to live into who they are. That's midnight. When people are allowed to live into who they are, that means they're going to live loudly, or at least more openly, into ways that they had done quietly before. Hey, can you lay down? And I don't want to mix up the fact that I said the word safety with the fact that I think people are safe to be who they are, because that would be absolutely incorrect. We know that it is not always safe, in fact, frequently not safe for people to be 100% who they are in this society today. But the idea that this is like a new thing and that all of a sudden people are this way, or all of a sudden it's fashionable to speak out against heteronormativity or be part of the LGBTQI plus community or be someone who is transgender, it's just not true. And for so many people, it's like coming into their awareness for the first time because they're not part of these communities, and it's never occurred to them that anyone else might be, because it's not been a part of the reality of the society that they're in, that people could openly express that. So, responses to some of the arguments that we keep hearing either on the channel or in real life in regards to this being a new thing. Specifically, this refusing the binary is new. I don't understand why this is so hard to do, because just as my own personal experiment, I hit Google and I was like, hey, how long have there been more than two genders? And the very first 3 to 5 searches were from reputable sources, but anthropologists have found evidence that goes back over 3,000 years. We're talking like Iron Age, we're talking even further back than that people have lived into having more than two genders. So I wouldn't really call that new. I don't know about you. The term trans is relatively new when you're talking about the timeline of the world, because it was brought into more popular usage in the 60s and 70s. So if we want to talk about new, I guess we could call that new. That was, 60 years ago. I don't know how new we're calling that. Who is saying new? I guess it depends on the age of the person who's saying it. That still feels like a long time ago. But I'll give it to you. 60 years ago is relatively new compared to, the age of the United States. Maybe, definitely new compared to the age of the world. But if we're going by that, by when the word was popularized, then did heterosexual people not exist before 1868? Because 1868 is when the word heterosexual was coined. So we're not even talking about when it was used in everyday language. It wasn't until 1868 that word was coined. So did they not exist before then? Because I'm confused. If that's your argument, that's fine. But you can't have that argument for one and not the other. Let's just have consistency. So if we're not going with words and we're defining it as people moving away from the gender that they were presumed to be when they were born, or living what some people would refer to as cross-gender lives, there is evidence of this on every continent, in every civilization since before recorded time. And that is not hard to back up. There's peer-reviewed research that this has been found by anthropologists. And I guess the problem that I have pretty consistently is when people say, yes, it gets said, but I've never seen evidence of it. And it's how have you looked? Where have you looked? Because if you're not looking for it, if you're not investigating and you're just assuming it didn't happen because it doesn't make sense to you, that's not research. Language is constantly changing. It's always evolving. There are words in our language that meant nothing just a few years ago, let alone 100 years ago, right? The world is constantly changing, and you either catch up to the change or you're left behind. That is how evolution works. Like, that is how society works. Another one we hear a lot is that, like, sex is a biological imperative like other mammals. So this is one that I really love hearing, because how I hear this from Christians, and I look at them and I am baffled by the whole God created man and woman and then created all the animals and brought the animals to Adam and Eve to name, or whichever, like, Genesis 1, Genesis 2 creation story you choose. But if you don't believe that humans evolved, you can't say to me, like all other mammals, we have to mate to procreate. That's not a valid argument unless you're also willing to say to me that we are part of this evolutionary chain that came from a single-celled organism. Because if you're going to say to me that we are a different creature than these other creatures, then those rules can't apply. If I'm going to go with we're a different creature, then there's nothing left to say. If we're going to go with we all came from the same place in evolutionary terms, sex doesn't have to just be for procreation, right? There are lots of animals out there, not every animal, there are lots of animals out there that have sex for more than just procreation, including humans. Additionally, and this is just like, I guess me being a wise ass, but like, just because pregnancy can happen from two people having sex does not mean it is the purpose of it, right? Because like, an STI can happen from unprotected sex, just like pregnancy can, but you would never say that sex is for getting an STI, right? And the last one that happens a lot, and I think it's just in an effort to like shame the person that you're talking to, is when people call out heteronormativity, it's called being selfish, and people are said to be self-indulgent because they are saying that heteronormativity is wrong. This one specifically happened recently here on this channel. Just because it's normal to you and just because it fits your filter does not mean it's okay, and does not mean it's normal for everybody. Doesn't mean we just stop evolving because it's comfortable for you. I am sorry if society moving forward into accepting more people and being more equal for people is uncomfortable for some other people. I'm sorry for that. And also, that's not a reason to stop evolving as a society. It's just not. This idea of selfishness is fairly rooted in the concept that we're obligated to have babies to carry on a species. And number one, humans are overpopulated, so like that's not necessary right now. And number two, those who can carry babies do not owe you their wombs. They do not owe you their bodies to carry said babies. They just don't. They're not there for you. And assuming that they are, that is what's selfish. Like assuming that you have any ownership or dominion over someone's body like that, that is actually selfish. Because it's for you. It's for what you think is important. Nothing to do with that other person's body. Okay. And that's it for today. Thank you so much for being here. I will see you all next time. And until then, take care of yourselves and each other.